What if I told you that a single tablespoon of kitchen syrup could turn your struggling garden into a thriving ecosystem where earthworms multiply like magic and plants explode with growth? Most gardeners pour plain compost tea onto their soil and wonder why nothing changes. Meanwhile, savvy growers are adding one overlooked ingredient that creates a microbial feeding frenzy so powerful that worms literally travel across yards to feast in their gardens. The secret ingredient sitting in your pantry right now is molasses, and when used correctly, it transforms ordinary compost tea into a living, breathing soil supercharger that works faster than any expensive fertilizer you've ever bought. Why most compost teas fail to deliver results. Compost tea seems simple enough: steep some compost in water, let it sit, and pour it on plants. But here's what most gardeners miss. Without proper food for microorganisms, your tea becomes nothing more than muddy water with a few sleepy bacteria floating around. Think of compost microbes like a sleeping army. They're there, ready to work, but they need fuel to wake up and multiply. Plain water doesn't provide that fuel. Molasses does. When you add this concentrated sugar source to your brewing tea, you're essentially ringing the dinner bell for billions of beneficial bacteria. These awakened microbes don't just sit in your tea looking pretty. They create a chain reaction that transforms your entire soil ecosystem. Bacteria multiply exponentially, feeding protozoa, which release plant-available nutrients, which attract earthworms, which create rich castings that feed more microbes. It's a beautiful cycle that starts with one simple ingredient. The science behind molasses magic is honestly pretty fascinating. Molasses works because it's pure microbial fuel. Derived from sugarcane or sugar beet processing, it contains simple carbohydrates that aerobic bacteria devour instantly. But it's not just sugar that makes molasses special. This thick, dark syrup also contains trace minerals like iron, calcium, and potassium that microorganisms need to thrive. When bacteria sense molasses in their environment, they shift into overdrive. In a properly aerated tea, you can have billions of bacteria multiplying within just 24 hours. These bacteria produce chemical signals and scents that earthworms detect from surprising distances. Worms aren't just randomly wandering through your soil. They're following microbial highways, seeking out the richest feeding zones. This is why molasses-enhanced compost tea works so quickly. You're not just feeding your plants, you're creating a beacon that draws soil life from across your entire garden space. The exact formula that works every time. Here's the precise recipe that transforms ordinary compost tea into a worm magnet. Start with a 5-gallon bucket filled with 4.5 gallons of non-chlorinated water. If you only have tap water, let it sit uncovered for 24 hours to allow chlorine to evaporate, as chlorine kills the very microbes you're trying to multiply. Add 2 to 3 cups of high-quality finished compost inside a mesh bag or an old pillowcase. The compost should smell earthy and sweet, never sour or rotten. Foul odors indicate anaerobic conditions that you definitely don't want to reproduce in your tea. Now comes the crucial ingredient. Add exactly 1 to 2 tablespoons of unsulfured blackstrap molasses. This specific type is minimally processed and, it retains the most minerals. Just keep in mind, any more than 2 tablespoons can actually backfire by feeding harmful anaerobic bacteria instead of the beneficial aerobic ones you want. The most critical step is continuous aeration. Place an aquarium pump with air stones into the bucket and let it bubble constantly for 24 to 36 hours. This oxygen keeps the good bacteria thriving, and honestly, it prevents the brew from turning anaerobic and smelly. Your tea is ready when it smells sweet and earthy, with a slight frothy foam on top. If it smells sour or rotten, something went wrong, usually from inadequate aeration or too much molasses. It's best to start over, rather than applying bad tea to your garden. So, when you're applying your molasses compost tea, it's best to do it during early morning or late afternoon, just to protect those beneficial microbes from UV damage. For maximum worm attraction, you should use it as a soil drench, pouring it directly around the bases of your plants where those microbes can really colonize the root zone, You can also, spray it on the leaves for a bit of disease protection, but honestly, soil application is where the real magic happens. Within just a few days of applying the tea, you'll start noticing increased earthworm activity in the treated areas. And these aren't brand new worms showing up out of nowhere. They're actually existing worms leaving less fertile spots to come feast in your newly enriched zones. Regular applications of molasses compost tea do a lot more than just provide temporary nutrition. They actually help establish permanent worm highways all throughout your garden. These areas turn into self-sustaining fertility centers where worms continuously deposit nutrient-rich castings that feed even more microbes, which in turn attract even more worms. It's a pretty amazing cycle, honestly. This creates what soil scientists call a positive feedback loop. Each application makes the soil more attractive to beneficial organisms, which improve the soil further, which attracts even more beneficial life. Over time, you're building a living system that requires fewer external inputs while producing better results. The biggest mistake gardeners make is adding too much molasses. More isn't better when it comes to feeding microbes. Excess sugar feeds anaerobic bacteria that create toxic conditions for plants and beneficial organisms. Another critical error is inadequate aeration. Without constant oxygen, your tea quickly becomes a breeding ground for harmful bacteria. Never skip the air pump and never let your tea sit without bubbling. Timing matters too. Apply your tea immediately after the 24 to 36-hour brewing period. Like fresh bread or yogurt, living compost tea has a peak window of vitality. Let it sit longer, and the beneficial microbes either die off or shift toward less helpful populations. While molasses excels at feeding bacteria, just remember that it primarily supports bacterial-dominated soil systems, which are absolutely perfect for vegetable gardens. If you're growing fruit trees or woody perennials that prefer fungal-dominated soils, consider adding small amounts of kelp, meal, or humic acid alongside molasses for, a more balanced microbial population. For most home gardens, though, the simple molasses formula provides exactly the bacterial boost that vegetables crave, while creating the earthworm paradise that, honestly, every gardener dreams of achieving. This isn't just another gardening trick. It's actually a fundamental shift toward working with soil biology instead of against it. Every application builds toward a self-sustaining ecosystem that produces healthier plants with, frankly, less work and fewer inputs. Ready to transform your garden soil overnight? Try this molasses formula and just watch your garden come alive. And hey, don't forget to subscribe to Crop Corner for more game-changing gardening secrets that really work. And share this with fellow gardeners who deserve soil that actually works for them instead of against them.